Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Writing Support Center workshop. My name is Giselle, and today's workshop is called Combining Sentences Effectively. If you've ever wondered how to better combine your sentences, if you write choppy sentences, if you want to create longer or essentially more effective sentences, this workshop's for you. So before we begin, there are a few things you can do to get the most out of this workshop. If you've taken a Writing Support Center workshop before, this may seem familiar to you. So feel free to skip ahead if you've already taken one. If this is your first time, please be sure to complete the accompanying directed learning activity. So wherever you access this workshop, there should be a directed learning activity called Sentence Structure 8, Combining Sentences Effectively. And that's a worksheet we're going to be using throughout this workshop. If you are getting extra credit, or if you're doing this as an assignment for a course, that is essentially your proof that you've completed this workshop. You also want to take your time. So since this is a recorded workshop, you can pause and rewind as needed. Sometimes maybe I'll be going a bit too fast for you, or you might need some time to complete the exercises on the worksheet. So just pause if you need to. Consider reviewing your completed DLA with a WSC tutor, either online or in person. So if you notice at the bottom of the DLA, there is a part for a signature. You don't need to see a tutor to have your DLA reviewed since you are taking this workshop. However, it would be helpful because the tutor can go over the answers with you and they can just clarify any final questions you have since I'm unable to do that with you. You can schedule an appointment with one of our tutors online or in person. Well, you don't need to schedule, we're all walk-in. So if you're interested in tutoring, just Google Writing Support Center PCC and you'll be able to see our hours of operation along with a link to our virtual Writing Support Center. All right, so there's a few learning outcomes for this DLA/workshop. The first is that you're going to develop sentence writing style and correctness. You're also going to practice sentence combining by observing, analyzing, and imitating written models. So what that means is we're going to be looking at examples of combined sentences, and you're going to also try to imitate those examples in order to get some practice for combining sentences. You're also going to develop more effective sentences through sentence combining. So the ultimate goal is that you're going to take choppy sentences and you're going to make them into a more effective sentence by putting them together. So what is sentence combining? The definition of it is the act of organizing sets of short, choppy sentences into longer, more effective ones. The goal when you combine sentences is not to produce longer sentences. So that's not the goal. Just because they're choppy, it doesn't mean a longer sentence is better. Instead, you want to develop more effective sentences. And ultimately, that's going to help you become a more versatile writer. So being able to create different sentences is going to help you write better. You also want to experiment. So there is no one way or a single correct way to combine a sentence. There's so many ways that you can put a sentence together. So you're going to have to try different arrangements to find the best one for your needs and your purpose. So we're going to go over 3 different strategies for combining sentences. And this first one is called coordinating conjunctions. That might sound familiar to you. Maybe you've heard it in your English class. But what are coordinating conjunctions? So a conjunction is are words used to bring together 2 short sentences or fragments. Now, if you're unsure what a fragment is not a complete sentence, and therefore it cannot stand alone. So a conjunction can be used to join 2 fragments or 2 short sentences in order to make it more effective and make sense. Coordinating conjunctions are usually in the middle of a sentence since they are connecting clauses, words, or phrases. So usually with coordinating conjunctions, they're not going to be at the beginning. You're going to find them in the middle when you join them together. And I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like. Some of you might be familiar with the term fanboys. Now that's an acronym for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. All of those are commonly used coordinating conjunctions. So like I said, these words are going to go in the middle of the sentence, and they're the most commonly used, and fanboys is just an easy way to remember all of those words. So if you ever want to remember coordinating conjunctions, just imprint that word fanboys, that acronym fanboys into your head. There's also a table on the DLA worksheet that shows more of when you should use the different conjunctions. So for is to show the difference between, or not the difference, but it's to show a cause and effect relationship. And you usually are using when you're adding more information into a sentence. Nor removes our alternatives. So if you have two negatives, it tells you what something is not rather than what it is. So you would use this instead of or if you have two negatives in the sentence. But is used to show contradiction, offer a contrast, or it's to introduce something unexpected. Or is to offer a choice. So do you want this or do you want that? Yet is similar to but it shows a stronger contrast. So if there's something you want to show a bigger difference between something, yet might be the better option. And then there's also so, and it's used to show the result of a cause and effect relationship. So this is exercise 1. There is exercise 1 on your DLA. You're going to do that on your own, but we're going to do the first one together so that you can get some practice seeing what coordinating conjunctions looks like. So the first sentence, number 1 on your worksheet reads, some students stay on the sidewalks. Some students cut across the grass. As you can see, these are two sentences. They can be joined since they're similar. And in this case, you want to use a word that's going to add information and show the connection between two things. So one way you can write the sentence is some students stay on the sidewalks, comma, and some students cut across the grass. So because these are two complete sentences, I added a coordinating conjunction, but I also added a comma. So if you have a complete sentence on one side and a complete sentence on the other, you usually need to add a comma with your fanboys. So make sure you're doing that. Okay, so that's question 1. You're going to now work on the other questions on your own. Don't reuse and. So since we used and for number 1, you're going to have to use for, nor, but, or, yet. So for the other ones, and you want to try not to repeat using conjunctions. So go ahead and pause here. And once you're ready, continue with the rest of the workshop. All right, so once you've completed all 6 questions for exercise 1, let's move on to the next strategy. So our second strategy for combining sentences is called subordinating conjunctions. So it's a conjunction strategy, but they're different from coordinating conjunctions. So a subordinating conjunction is used to provide a necessary transition between the two ideas in a sentence. The transition usually indicates a time, place, or cause and effect relationship. So one major difference between a subordinating conjunction and a coordinating conjunction is while a coordinating conjunction goes in the middle of a sentence, a subordinating conjunction can actually go at the beginning of the sentence. So some examples of subordinating conjunctions are because, unless, even though, although, and while. And those subordinating conjunctions can also go in the middle, but unlike coordinating conjunctions, they can also go at the beginning of the sentence. So those are the different ones that you can use if you are going to join, or if you're going to take two choppy sentences and create them into a more effective one. You can also use subordinating conjunctions to do it. So I'm going to show you, well, before we do that, there's also a table on your worksheet that shows subordinate conjunctions and also shows you when to use them. So because you're going to use if you want to show a cause and effect relationship. So this happened because of this. Unless is to show a condition, even though, although, those all show contrast to introduce a fact that makes another fact unusual or surprising. So it's kind of, if you want to emphasize, a contrasting relationship between two things, and you would use one of those words. And while is to show time. So this is happening while this other thing is happening. So those are all different subordinating conjunctions, and I'm going to show you an example of how to use this. Oh, give me 1 second. Okay, so exercise 2 on your worksheet is going to give you some practice using subordinating conjunctions. And again, you're going to need to use because, unless, even though, although, while, but you don't want to repeat the words. So we're going to use one right now, and then you're not going to be able to use that for the rest of the questions in exercise 2. So the first one is the same sentence as our coordinating conjunction sentence, and it reads, some students stay on the sidewalks, some students cut across the grass. So in this case, I'm going to use a subordinating conjunction, and I start the sentence with while some students stay on the sidewalks, some students cut across the grass. So if you notice, this is a dependent clause, the first part. So I need the comma here to join it to the independent clause, because a dependent clause can't stand alone. And the reason why it became a dependent clause is because I added the subordinating conjunction at the beginning. While some students stay on the sidewalks, you're waiting for the rest of that sentence, right? So while is the subordinating conjunction used at the beginning to join these two sentences together. And it reads smoother than the first two being cut across, because now I understand the relationship between the two sentences. So like I said, you can use a subordinating conjunction at the beginning, but you can also put it in the middle of the sentence. So something like, some students stay on the sidewalks while some students cut across the grass, right? So I could have put it in the middle, but I wanted to show you what it looked like in the beginning. So go ahead and complete the rest of the questions in exercise 2 and try to use different subordinating conjunctions for each question. Pause here, and once you're ready, continue with the workshop. All right, so we're going to move on to the next strategy, which is called omission. So what is omission? Omission is the act of deleting repetitive words and phrases to bring together details that are expressing a similar idea. So essentially, omission is just getting rid of those extraneous words because they're just repetitive and they don't add anything to your sentences. You can create 2 new sentences when you do omission, or you can create one clear, coherent sentence, depending on what is going to work best for your needs. So here's an example on the right of an omission. So she was our Spanish teacher. We were in high school. She was tiny. She was a bird-like woman. So if you look at this sentence, we have, or this group of sentences, we have she, and she. This is repeated 3 times in the sentence. So that's one word that you can tell yourself to eliminate. We were in high school. That's not repeated, but there's a way that we can put that together so that it doesn't need to be its own standalone sentence. So each of these sentences right here, she was our Spanish teacher. She was tiny. She was a bird-like woman. They're all describing this person. So I think we can put those together in one sentence. Again, this is choppy. This is an example of short, choppy sentences that can be made into more effective ones. And in this case, I would say omission would be best to bring these 4 sentences together. So there's 3 different examples, like I told you in the beginning. There's not one way to combine sentences. There's always going to be numerous ways. And it's important that you experiment to make sure that you're finding the most effective combination for your writing. So I'm going to give you 3 different examples. One is our Spanish teacher in high school was a tiny bird-like woman. So this sample managed to get all of the teacher's traits into one sentence while also expressing that this person was in high school during the time. And again, there's no we mentioned in there. Was is only mentioned once versus it was mentioned 3 times in the first example. And it's a much smoother, more coherent sentence. And it's one sentence. You can still put it into 2 though. And here's an example. When we were in high school, our Spanish teacher was a tiny woman. She was also bird-like. So I still think this first one's more effective, but this one wouldn't be wrong either. It just puts the information into 2 sentences versus 1. And the final example is our high school Spanish teacher was a tiny bird-like woman. So if you notice, the biggest difference between example 1 and example 2 is this person took high school instead of saying in high school, they just made it an adjective and put it, or they use it as a descriptor and put it before Spanish teacher. So our high school Spanish teacher was a tiny bird-like woman. In my opinion, I think 1 and 3 are the most effective versions because they are one sentence and they omit the most amount of words. It's very coherent and clear and easy to understand. So that's an example of omission. Now, because I gave you that example of omission, you're going to work on the exercises in exercise 3. You have about 9 of them, and you'll see various sets of choppy sentences. So just practice putting them into more effective sentences. You can use both coordinating and subordinating conjunctions to join these sentences, but the goal is to get them down to at least 1 sentence or 2, depending on what's best for what sounds the best to you. So go ahead and do that, pause here, and once you're ready, continue with the workshop. All righty. So this is bringing us to the end of our workshop, but I wanted to give you some things to remember about sentence combining. You can use this list whenever you go to revise your sentences. So say you have an essay you're working on right now, and you have issues with choppy sentences. Use this list as you're going through your essay to catch those sentences, to create them, to make them more effective. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is meaning. As far as you can determine, have you conveyed the idea intended by the original author? Is your sentence clear? Can it be understood on the first reading? So that you want to also check for clarity when you're looking at your sentences. You also want to check for coherence. So do the various parts of the sentence fit together logically and smoothly? That's a big question. Is it coherent? Like I said in this sentence, I found this one the most coherent because it made the most sense to me and it fit together the most logically and smoothly. Emphasis. So are keywords and phrases put in the emphatic position, which means are those words and phrases usually put at the very end or at the very beginning of the sentence? So whatever you want to emphasize, you want to make sure it's either at the beginning or end of the sentence. Number 5 is you want to check for conciseness. So does the sentence clearly express an idea without wasting words? This is where omission really helps, right? Because omission helps you get your sentences more concise by getting rid of those words that you don't need. So you always want to look for conciseness. And finally, you want to look for rhythm. So does the sentence flow, or is it marked by awkward interruptions? Do the interruptions help to emphasize key points, which is an effective technique, or do they merely distract, an ineffective technique? So let's see, for rhythm, she was our Spanish teacher. We were in high school. She was tiny. She was a bird-like woman. It almost sounds like a poem to me when I'm reading it, but if you're putting this into an essay, it's a bit too choppy and it definitely has an awkward rhythm. So that would be assigned to you to revise those sentences. Again, one good strategy if you're going to go revise your sentences in your essay, read them out loud. You might catch it when you're reading and you're like, I say she a lot in that sentence, in that group of sentences, or this idea seems a little unclear. Maybe it's the way I wrote the sentence. Maybe I can write this more effectively. So reading things out loud to yourself is going to help a lot to catch those choppy, awkward sentences so that you can find them and write more effective ones. So thanks for viewing this workshop. As I said in the beginning, consider visiting the Writing Support Center and having a tutor review your completed DLA. Again, if you're unsure of some of the combinations you did in your exercises, they'll be able to check them for you and let you know how you did. Or if you want to get help on your actual essay, maybe you have an issue with choppy sentences in your actual essay, you can get that checked by a Writing Support Center tutor as well. Again, just Google Pasadena City College, WSC. It should pop up and you'll be able to access either our Zoom services or you'll find our hours for in-person services. Again, thanks for viewing this workshop and we hope to see you at the next one.